and future plans. It's essential to consider various perspectives and information sources
Brother
before
Ahmed, we're
making
going to
your
go on now.
decision.
Inshallah.
Catch this
Jazak.
important Election 2024 special Tuesday, 7th May 2024 at 8 p.m. on Radio Islam International.
قد زانت ذي الدنيا وسموا حبا قصد العليا صاغوا للمجد رسالتهم وأبوا إلا نورا هديا
This is Sabaahul Muslim.
التقوى عنوانا للحب الأخضر.
Welcome back to Sabaahul Muslim here on Radio Islam International. We acknowledge our listeners on Radio Al Ansar listening to us in Durban and Pietermaritzburg as well. So, we are profiling various political parties as part of our election coverage for this year's national and provincial elections. Today, we are going to be talking to the presidential candidate for the Allied Movement for Change, AM4C, and that is Ahmed Manzoor Sheikh Imam. Mr. Imam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Radio Islam International. We appreciate your time.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from a very warm Durban, and shukran for having me on the air this morning.
Now, many of our listeners and viewers are familiar with you. They've seen clips of you in Parliament bringing up issues that are close to the hearts of Muslims, like Palestine, etc. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But let me start off by asking you that you were part of the NFP. What led to your decision to leave that party and join the AM4C? What is it about the AM4C that appealed to you?
Well, first of all, I was a founding member of the National Freedom Party, together with my former leader, who's now deceased, Zanele Magwazam Siwi. And as you know, we've done exceptionally well when we first started. And then disaster struck, of course. In 2014, she had a massive stroke. 2016, we were sabotaged. Our treasurer deliberately did not pay the registration fee. So all the gains we made, we have lost, which resulted in infighting in the party itself. There were factions. The factions remain there up to this very day as I speak to you. I must be honest with you. Only I know what I've experienced in the NFP, particularly after my president taking ill, racist remarks, and a whole lot of problems, which really think it's unnecessary. But what is important is the factionalism continues. They keep fighting. They are in court every other day, including last week, and in court next week again, where they are attempting to set aside, each faction. So, it's not progressive. Then there's been a call from many of them in the NFP and abroad that no, you can't continue at this rate. You have a role to play. You have a lot to offer. I think we need to look at Plan B. So it initiated from the NFP itself, and that is why the deputy president of the NFP and many others have joined me in the Allied Movement for Change. Having said that, what happened is this: I was attempting to launch another political party, and then, of course, the Allied Movement for Change is in the political domain since 2013, with a seat in Indoni municipality. And of course, the then leader called me to say, listen, I've been following for quite a while. I want to start, prepare to step down, and we need an alternative. And I believe you could take this party forward. We have discussion. We went through all the processes, and I was elected as the president of the organization. And that's where I am today. So it wasn't a decision that I would have taken, but it's a decision I took based on the circumstances.
Now, there are those voters out there who may be inclined to vote for the party because of you. You've got a profile for standing up for certain issues that are close to especially the hearts of Muslims and many justice and peace-seeking, citizens of the country. But people worry. Many, if not most parties, post an election, the infighting starts. Some even before the election. So there was a leadership previously. You've now taken over the party. You've explained that you've been through the processes. You're the president of the party. You're the presidential candidate. What measures have you put in place to ensure that post the elections, where your face is used, your profile is used, votes are secured, where the old guard don't want to come and take back the party now that he's achieved some success?
Well, first of all, let me say that the Allied Movement for Change has only concentrated in local government before. And then we've decided that no, indeed, we need a provincial presence and a national presence. So yes, indeed, the kind and character or caliber of people that we have currently and that we've recruited on board the Allied Movement for Change will clearly indicate the direction in which we are moving. It's people driven, Islamic ethos and principles and values, very importantly. And I can assure you and the listeners out there, indeed, the Allied Movement for Change is here to stay, to make meaningful contribution. And as you know, in my particular participation in Parliament, I've been the lone voice of the National Freedom Party, and I know many people feel that smaller parties don't have a lot to offer, can't make meaningful contribution. But I think my experience and my performance speaks volumes that despite being a smaller party, we were able to achieve a lot. The downgrading of the South African embassy, Palestinians coming free, visa free to South Africa right now, police officers, the challenges that they face, but many other challenges, the headscarf, the problems we've had at OR Tambo Airport. These are some of just a handful of things that I have taken on. And of course, I think we performed exceptionally well. So we have a lot to offer, I must be honest. But what is important, I want to say, I'm not planning and preparing to stay in politics and in parliament for more than 5 years. What we are attempting to do right now is to identify in the younger generation amongst our people those that have got the integrity, the capacity, the ability to lead us, and prepare them, groom them so that they can be the future statesmen and stateswomen of this country. So there's a process that we've already initiated with organizations like ASRI and OCOF and things like that, where we are planning and preparing to identify them and prepare them and strategically place them in positions in governance in the country and on international politics as well.
On that note about smaller parties, right? We know that many Muslim voters are highly angry at those parties who have taken a pro-Israel position, right? At the same time, whilst they acknowledge the ANC for what it has done, going to the ICJ, etc., they're very worried about the track record when it comes to corruption and service delivery of the ANC. And there are many within our community who are thinking of putting their axe next to the smaller parties. But the concern they have is that these smaller parties will end up in alliance, either with one of these bigger parties who are pro-Israel or with the current ruling party, the ANC. What's your policy in terms of coalitions? Because everyone is saying in the KZN province, in the Gauteng province, in all likelihood, there's going to be a coalition government, and that nationally as well, depending on how much the ANC drops below 50%, there may be a need for a coalition. What's your policy on coalitions?
What is certain that even if it's not in this election, future of coalition politics is here to stay. And I think clearly from the performance of coalition partners in the country, we are not ready for it. There's no doubt about it. And one of the problems we have, even with smaller parties, and I must admit this, and I can understand the concerns of our listeners, that you tend to lose your independence and your objectivity when you are there. Now, let me say this, that I've had discussions with the deputy president of the ANC in terms of who led the coalition discussions from the ANC perspective. I've also attended the coalition at about 10 out of the 14 meetings, 10 or 12 of the other, which is the multi-party coalition. And I can tell you the first one, the multi-party or the Moonshot Pact is not going to work. It's going to collapse. But there is a serious threat in the country, there's no doubt. On the issue of ANC, unfortunately, the arrogance of the ANC by virtue of having the majority remains. But what political parties will have to do, and there's an ideal example of what I have said to the Deputy President, should it be deemed necessary that the Allied Movement for Change will work with you, it will be on certain conditions. And one of them is no politician will have anything to do with procurement, which is to deal with tenders and buying and things like that. And secondly, no politician will have anything to do with the employment or appointment of office bearers. Let there be independent bodies that are fit for purpose to be able to do that, because that is what leads to the country losing an estimated 500 billion rand a year. But added to that, coalition partners mean that we must sit and negotiate everything, even if there's a change of policy, even if we want to implement something. And that does not happen as far as the ANC is concerned, because they dominate and smaller parties get swallowed in. And I can say this without any doubt. I've raised these things and I've made it very clear that in my previous party, the NFP, I led the negotiation on coalition governments in KwaZulu-Natal because we were co-governing 19 municipalities. And we made sure where they governed, where they had the mayor, we had the deputy mayor or speaker, and vice versa. And we made it very clear what we should be doing is sitting down on everything. But what I'm emphasizing on, because of the high levels of corruption and embezzlement, keep the politicians out of this. Our responsibility is to implement programs and conduct oversight and make sure there's consequence management, not to get involved in deciding who we must employ and our own people or deciding who should get the tenders or not. This country has enough resources, but it is being embezzled by a handful of people. So I think in terms of coalition, it will work on condition that you are going there with the interest of the people at large, not for positions and power. ANC often will give you a position of minister or deputy minister, and the moment you get that, that is to suppress you. And we should not be going there to want those positions, but to make sure that coalition politics work in the interest of the people and hold those parties accountable, including them. In my case, I have commended the ANC when they performed well and criticized them when they made mistakes.
Now, I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about, but time is limited in terms of your manifesto, in terms of economic policy, social welfare, governance and accountability, environmental sustainability, social cohesion, foreign policy, and the like. But what for you should stand out for the voter? What is it about AM4C that should make them tick next to your party's name come the day of the elections? What is different about your manifesto?
Very quickly, let me tell you a few things. Number one, economic growth in the country. It's paramount for success in this country. And if you look at it right now, 60% of the youth is unemployment. We want to enhance the manufacturing sector. And in doing that, it means we have to lower the cost of doing business. This is one of the reasons why businesses are closing down. The unions and others have to come to the party. We have to enhance the agricultural sector. South Africa has some of the most arable land in the world, but we want to import wheat, sugar, and maize. Can you imagine? We've given solutions as far as the manufacturing, limit the imports into the country, okay? Reduce the reliance on imports. Let's enhance the manufacturing sector, the agricultural sector. The mining sector, we said very clearly, let it be a win-win situation for the people of this country. Why should the private sector control the entire mine? Why should it not be a 50-50% where the people of this country benefit 50% and the private sector 50% like it now? What the president of Botswana, Masisi, is doing. And I've raised it, and the Minister of Mineral and Energy has agreed on that. And that's one of the things. Secondly, housing. 3 million people don't have a house in South Africa, increasing by 200. What are we saying is, what stops us in every local municipality in the country to identify the people that are homeless and cannot afford homes? The land that is available, what stops us right now as I speak to you to subdivide that land? Let's not worry about the electricity, water, and sanitation. Give them the land, give them the dignity, give them the title deed, and annually, as the budget is available, you can provide them with the services. Can you imagine how that will boost economic growth? Imagine how it will give dignity back to your people. On the healthcare, what are we saying? In the health, we're saying let's have a preventative healthcare system. Let's roll out more doctors, nursing staff, and medical facilities in the communities. Not wait for people to get sick, go to doctors, go to hospitals, and die. Prevent that system. On crime and corruption, we're saying, let's start at grassroots. It's not the police that's the problem. It's we politicians that's the problem. What are we saying with crime and corruption? First of all, more power to the police and the defense force to go out there like what they've done in El Salvador. Look at what the guys, and that is why he had an 85% majority win. But what is important, place safety ambassadors in schools with social workers in the community. Identify children at an early stage that are coming from dysfunctional families. Together with those social workers in the community, if you work on those children, you'll save them from becoming criminal. No child is born a murderer or a rapist. These are just a handful of things. Again, we're saying in local government level, where all your corruption starts, and it's in all spheres of government, monthly, in the local newspapers, in your notice board, who the contracts were awarded, who the directors of this company they are, what was the value, what is the itemized billing, so that you can see who are these 17,500 black millionaires and millionaires that have multi-millionaires that have been benefiting from this corruption in South Africa that we produced in the last couple of years. These are just a handful, but also on police officers and things. Let's pay them a decent salary. Let's give them the right benefit. Let's recruit them. Let's make it part and parcel of your basic education, part of your curriculum. Also in schools do not attract children at the moment. Let's make sure there's emphasis on quality education rather than on quantity. Sports development, what are we saying? Let the government, the municipalities be responsible for employing sports coaches so that they can coach our children. Can you imagine 62 million people in South Africa? We can't even win a soccer match or a cricket match. But let that become the responsibility of government, not of the basic education, because basic education, sports and arts and culture, they are fighting for their budgets amongst each other. So there's a whole lot of things that we believe in. Let's look at the first indigenous nation. We are saying let's recognize them because that is what we have to do. The employment equity bill, we believe, is a problem because it's going to marginalize and victimize the Indian, colored, and the white communities. The BEE is not working. A brilliant idea brought in to enhance Black economic empowerment, but it's only benefiting a handful of people. So there's a whole lot of things that we believe that you can do differently in South Africa. Some of these things don't need money. Some of these things can be done in short term, medium term, and long term. Why should the wealth of this country not belong to the people in this country? I mean, the Constitution of the Freedom Charter says that. But is that the case at the moment? Clearly not. We're calling for a state bank. What is the purpose of a state bank? The state bank to fund. Remember, it's the Reserve Bank that funds some of these banks and things, lend them. Why can't we have a state bank to fund development in the country, particularly in terms of housing and many other things, at a nominal interest rate? So these are just a handful of things that we believe that we can do differently. But I can tell you now, I noticed that the focus is on people blaming the police for everything. It's not the police. It's the socio-economic conditions. Look at the kind of housing, no electricity, there's no roads, the high unemployment rate. I'm going to give you a good example. I've raised this with the president, said that with a 60% unemployment rate in the country, did you know if you need a haircut, you can only get a foreigner to give you a haircut? Why not take 4 youth and train them into be hairdressers and 4 girls into beautician? As the AM4C, we've just produced 72 barbers, locally produced barbers in South Africa and beautician. We are now taking it to all over the country. That would have created 36,000, if not 54,000 jobs in South Africa if government is serious and wants to take it forward. You know, so these are just some of the things, my brother.
Just finally then, right? I mean, every party will say they're contesting the elections to win it, and therefore they have presidential candidates and premier candidates. But realistically speaking, what's your target in terms of number of seats in parliament or percentage of votes or number of votes for this particular election?
Well, to start off, I think my target at this point in time is 8 seats in parliament. So we know we can make significant contribution. And we also know that we would be able to hold any other party, accountable. We would have decisive numbers. The numbers is what is going to make the difference, to be able to not only hold them accountable, but to ensure that policies that do not work need to be amended. We need to implement those that can work. We need to go back to the drawing board and be able to see what has worked for us, what is not working, how do we do it differently. But what is important is this, to have a presence there, but a significant presence, so that you are not undermined by larger parties, because larger parties that may want to be there and believe that they have the power, but given the fact that they will be restricted in terms of the numbers that they will need the other political parties. And the other political parties like the AM4C, that's where we come in, where we will put pressure on them and say, no, we will work with you on condition that everything we do must benefit the people on the ground. I must be very honest with you. I have addressed the issue of corruption over 50 times. Not one of these political parties will support it because they all benefit from it. But if we have a significant number in parliament, then yes, indeed, we'll be able to influence the decisions that take in the interest of the people we serve.
Mr. Imam, shukran so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and all the best.
Shukran, jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi
wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That was the presidential candidate for AM4C and the current leader, Ahmed Manzoor Sheikh Imam, as part of our political party profile for today. Tomorrow, same time, 8:15.